Hello, and welcome once again to the Mind Series. I'm Dr. Ryan Thompson. I'm the CEO and Medical Director of Mind Matters Clinic in Murphys. And with me this evening is Marnie Dick, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. And tonight's subject will be continuing to talk about autism and the behavior analyst. And in this segment, we'll be talking about how can a behavior analyst help an individual with autism. So just to recap a little bit, what we talked about in our last segment was that children with autism are different than children without autism, and so learning how to parent them and learning how to recognize what their behaviors are and how they might be different from a child without autism. And then what we're going to try to do this evening is talk about what kind of things we can do to change those behaviors to help that individual to become successful, to become a part of the family that people enjoy, they can become accepted in society and just be successful in general. So basically we want to find out how can a behaviorist help. And I think that a lot of people who may be listening may not be familiar with what a behavior analyst is. And so first thing I'd like to do is just ask Marnie, just describe what is a behavior analyst and why should we care about it?
That's a good question. Well, a behavior analyst is someone who has a little bit education. I'm going to give you a little bit of education, of how to be a behavior analyst. So they typically would have a master's or a PhD in behavior analysis, and then what they do is they have to do an internship and have hours just like an MFT, and
that means a marriage and family therapist, right?
Yes, a marriage and family therapist. So we have to do an internship with so many hours under a board-certified behavior analyst. And then once we submit the hours, we have to take a test, just like a marriage and family therapist. And then if you pass, then you become a board-certified behavior analyst. So that's how we become one. And so what one is that we look at the environment. So basically there is no judgment from a behavior analyst.
Of the child or the parent?
Of the child or the parent. And so we're basically there we want to know what's happening, what's really going on, what's really happening, what are the real problems are. And so there's typically, at least I could speak for me, there's no judgment at all in that everybody has problems, everybody has issues, and so behavior analyst goes in and looks at what's actually happening, what's going on, the environmental variables that are happening that might be causing some of the behaviors to occur. So, and we are scientific based, so we're evidence based, and that behavior analyst, to me, there's no real guessing game. It's all data driven. And so we ask a lot of our parents to take data to tell us exactly what's happening and what's going on, so that we can see exactly, how many times behaviors are occurring and that kind of stuff. So our philosophy is that you know, when you come to us, it's going to be us working together, you know, and it's going to be data driven. There's no guessing, so you're going to be able to tell me exactly what's happening, what's not happening. The other good thing about being a behavior analyst is that nothing's ever set in stone. It's just like, okay, we're going to try this, you know, and see what happens. It might work, it might not,
So it's
but
not
let's
one
try
pathway.
it. Right. And then we have to tweak things or do something a different way. So we have lots of different avenues that we could take that we're taught in how to reduce behaviors.
So is the person you're working with as a behaviorist, is it the individual with autism or is it the parent?
It's both. You know, typically a lot of it's going to be the parent, and so it depends on where the child is, where the family is. So if there's really some social skill that needs to happen with that child, behaviors can sit down and do some teaching and some life skills or social behavior
With the individual.
which with the child, yeah. Where if there's environmental things going on, like a lack of a schedule or something like that, to help reduce some of the behaviors that are happening, we would work with the parent in that, making sure that the environment is pretty functional to keep those behaviors maintained or reduced.
When the family, say I have an individual with autism that comes to visit me, who is it that's concerned about the behavior, the person with autism or the parent?
The parent.
So then, as you work with the parent, how is it that how is it different that a behaviorist work with a parent versus a counselor? Now, a counselor might see a family in distress because their child's acting out and it's creating distress in the family. How is a behaviorist different than a counselor?
The difference between us is that we are going to focus on the behavior. We're going to, I care about what you think and feel, but typically that's what a counselor is about, is more mentalistic, where we're more environmental. You know, there's environmental variables or history that's maintaining this behavior or created this behavior. So that's what we typically will look at, is that.
What kind of an environmental variable? That's a term that I don't think most people would understand. What is environmental? What's that? It sounds like pollution. So is it pollution in the environment or what? What's
Yes, pollution is in the environment, but environmental variable is could be, it could be many things within your household. So it could be, you know, a TV being on all of the time. It could be a tablet being, you know, that's affecting some of the behaviors. It could be when your bedtime is. It could be when dinner time is. It could be how you introduce homework, you know. It could be, there's a lot of different things. So variables are just objects and things in the schedule within your environment that we call environmental variables that, you know, contribute to some of the maintaining or creating some of the behaviors. So
do you just see children with autism, or do you see other individuals too as a behaviorist?
Yeah, we see everybody. So as a behaviorist, what I love being a behaviorist and versus a counselor too is that we work with nonverbal and verbal. So we work with all you know, nonverbal or verbal beings. And so
and again, just to explain, some children with autism are not verbal, which means they're not able to communicate their needs.
Right.
They're not able to communicate what may be making things change for them, or how their environment, as you speak of it, their surroundings, how that's impacting them. So you can change that child's behavior without having them understand the explanation, or without them being able to relate back to you what you said?
Yes, because we read the behaviors. So we read what's happening and what's going on and what's that child trying to communicate, because as a behaviorist, I believe in behaviors speak louder than words, and so therefore I'm able to figure out what's happening or what's going on that might be triggering some of the behaviors. So
a trigger, I love that term, and I know it exists. And again, I'd
Yes.
just love to have you expand on a trigger. Just give me an example of a trigger.
A trigger could be you change their schedule, they're not wearing the right clothing, some clothings irritate their skin, how their shoes are, they don't have a certain toy, their toys got moved, gosh, they don't want to get in the car and it is time to get in the car.
So when that triggers, what does a trigger cause?
A trigger causes screaming, yelling, hitting, biting. I'm on the ground. You're not moving me. It could cause a variety of behaviors.
So some type of negative behavior, so undesirable behavior then.
Right.
Okay. And I know there's a thing called the ABCs.
Right.
And I know it's something that I speak of, I know little about. And maybe you can help me fill me in on what's an ABC and why is that really important for a parent with a child with autism to understand?
ABC is antecedent for the A, behavior for the B, and consequence for the C.
Okay.
And why it's how we, as behaviorists, we're a lot of times going to ask you to do an ABC. It's a chart. Tell me what happened prior to the behavior, which is your antecedent. What was the behavior that exactly happened? Was it hitting, kicking, biting? What is it? And what happened right after, which is your consequence. So either that consequence is maintaining that behavior and keeping it alive. We want to know exactly what's going on. And so that's what ABCs are. And it's really important because it lets us know what is maintaining that B, that behavior. So is there an antecedent that's happening that immediately, if that antecedent, that whatever's occurring right before the behavior, if that occurs I don't know, 3 o'clock or something happens, it's 3 o'clock, the behavior's going to happen. Sometimes we hear that, right? It's at 3 o'clock every day. Well, okay, what's happening at 3 o'clock? Are they hungry? Is it, what's going on? Is that when another kid comes home? What is it? So it helps us look at what's happening prior to the behavior. The C is the consequence. So sometimes, if we look at the consequence, what is it that's maintaining the behavior? Every time they perform hitting or biting, does the parent respond? So is that maintaining the behavior? Is it that there's a variety of different things that a parent can do in the consequence area that maintains the behavior?
So consequence isn't necessarily discipline.
No.
I know when you speak of consequence and what I think of consequence, I think of a parent logically going through, okay, this just happened, so there needs to be a consequence.
Right.
Hence, I'm going to deliver a consequence, which would be some type of discipline. But describe to me what you look for as a consequence.
Sometimes, a variety of things. So one is the parent reinforcing the behavior. So are they always responding every time that behavior happens, so therefore it's maintaining the behavior?
Responding, what's responding mean?
They go in, they tell the kids, stop it, quit it, remove something from them, cool out, something, some type of response.
So the way you see it then, if a parent responds, even if the parent thinks they're doing the right thing, then you're looking at that response as a consequence, and that consequence could be something that might actually make the behavior worse?
It can increase the behavior or keep the behavior going at all times. So the other thing is that a parent that can maintain the behavior is a parent will, so they go and the parent goes and says, it's time for you to pick up toys, and they scream and yell and, no, I'm not going to do it, and then the parent walks away because they're like, I'm not going to deal with this, I'm going to walk away. The child then learns at that point, oh, if I scream and yell, my parent will leave me alone, I don't have to pick up my toys. And so that will also maintain the behavior. That's also a consequence as well.
So does that look different than a non-autistic? Because that could sound like a spoiled child, right?
Right.
Does it look different than a child with autism?
that last example?
Yeah. So say
Yeah.
I'm going to scream and say I don't want to do it, something like that. Why does that look different in a non-autistic individual, or does it?
That's a good question.
Well, because I guess what I
So-
picture is an autistic individual oftentimes isn't very clever about what they do, and they don't seem as calculated. Don't seem. I say seem. They don't appear to it.
Right.
So I think oftentimes what I see is sometimes parents assuming that's their autism, and it's not really a behavior, and so they assign. They say, oh, okay,
I see.
I have to let go of it because it's their autism. So I have to back away from this because that's their autism. So they look for excuse, or they find excuses in some of those behaviors. So the consequence ends up being reinforcing unwittingly because they say, oh, well, I have to be
Yeah.
careful because they're autistic. They're different than
Right.
my other children. So I think they don't see it sometimes because kids with autism, I guess it just feels different, I think, to a parent. It looks different than a non, because they're autistic.
Right.
And so they don't know how to engage you in the same way that a child who may be kind of conniving or clever or that sort of thing. So it looks
Right.
different, I think, to some parents.
Right, and so in that last example, so I think that's where I got a little, it's like, no, to me it would not be
Right.
different versus an autistic and a non-autistic child. Because autistic children, to me, are smart and can figure out how to get rid of a parent.
They may just do it a little differently.
Yeah, they may do it just a little
A little more
bit.
obvious, too.
Yes.
Just yelling, kicking, falling down on the ground, banging your head
Very
against
dramatic,
the
right.
ground. Right. A little over the top.
Right. Very
Not
dramatic.
as measured.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, I know that kids with autism like schedules, and I know there's something called a visual schedule.
Right.
Tell me what a visual schedule is. Visual schedule is, and how that might be work for a parent with kids with autism.
Visual schedules are, to me, extremely important with autistic children who are nonverbal. And so, or just learning language. It lets them know exactly what's happening in their day because they understand the picture. It's pictures of like a toilet. It could be a picture of bedtime, could be a picture of dinner time, you know, so it lets them know when things are going to happen during the day. And so a visual schedule is very helpful if you are trying to incorporate or get your autistic child to do a chore, make their bed, you know, brush their teeth. You know, you have to put out this schedule of, because that's how they think. They think, I'm going to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And then I'll get to have your TV time or electronic time. So a visual schedule is very helpful if you are having issues with your autistic child in not brushing teeth, you know, not showering right. You know, you can have visual schedules on how to shower, how to properly brush your teeth, you know, the steps.
So where does this visual schedule go?
You can have one in the living room. You can have one in the bathroom that has shower time or brushing teeth. You can have it in their bedroom. You can have boards like a PEC board where they have a visual schedule and they carry around their board, and so they know exactly
what.
what.
Do you hang it up, or do you?
You can hang it up. It can sit somewhere. They can carry it. So.
So then you have to explain to them what each picture means?
Usually you pair it with what's happening at the time. And so if it's dinner time, you'll go, it's dinner time, and then you go to dinner. And so you compare the picture so they have an understanding of the picture if they're nonverbal.
Because if they don't speak, you can't know whether or not they understand what you're saying.
Right.
So then you show them the picture, you do the activity, and then they can learn over time that those two things equal one another?
Right.
Okay. So it's like, yeah, I can see that being similar to other things you might run into in life. Okay. So sometimes kids with autism have a lot of difficulty. I think you brought up in the last episode, they're expecting something to happen at 6 o'clock. It's dinner time. Schedules and changes in schedules. What kind of things do you see happen when children, when you say we're going to go to grandma's house today, you change your mind because it's snowing and the roads are closed, and the child still insists they should go see grandma?
Because that's on the schedule.
That's on the schedule. So how?
You said
how do you
we're
wrap your
going to
head around that?
grandma's.
Yeah.
We're going to grandma's. And so, yeah, that will cause a a huge amount of, not a huge, so some behaviors to happen, negative behaviors to happen. So because they have black and white thinking. So that schedule for that day, you said we're going to grandma's house, so therefore we're supposed to go to grandma's house. But the snow and the roads, and then you know, and so they don't understand that. So what? We get in the car and we go to grandma's house. It's that black and white thinking. So the best way to try and get through some of that is called social stories. Sometimes you can utilize social stories that says, you know, sometimes we can't travel during these road conditions when it's snowing and stuff because, you know, it's not safe and that kind of stuff.
So tell me, that I understood you say black and white thinking and black and white idea.
Right.
So I think I know what you mean. But you can describe again to a parent what they might see. What is it that a child who thinks in a black and white way doesn't understand, doesn't get?
So I'm trying to think
What's
of some
gray?
recent examples of
So
what.
just the example of snow on the road. I said you can go. What makes that a black and white thinker to think I should still be able to go with grandma's?
Well, they don't understand that the snow on the road causes, you know, it's hard to drive in, or if you don't have the proper car to drive in, then, you know, they don't understand that concept.
That there can be exceptions to the rule, kind of a thing?
Right. And some other black and white thinking is, you know, you know, you can tell a child, you know, I want you to pick up your toys. Mm-hmm. But really, you're like, you know, you wanted everything picked up. But they literally will only pick up their toys. The clothes will still be on the floor. Everything else could be on the floor. And you're looking at them, well, I told you to pick it, you know, the toys up off the floor. Well, I did pick up the toys. Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the individual,
right?
It's the parent learning how to communicate.
Right, how to communicate. And so they're black and they only think, you know, exactly what you say. So you have to be really careful on how you say things to them.
So then, like creating the expectation to go see grandma.
Right.
It could be the way that you might tell them, knowing that things can change.
Right.
But also, I guess, when you say, if you're giving them, if you're the example of picking up the toys, that's a classic one I can see.
Right.
And if you tell that to a child, you say, okay, I want you to go clean up the toys in your room. What you're really meaning in your head is I want you to basically clean everything in your room.
Off the floor, yeah.
Right.
Clean it
and
all
so
up.
when you say that,
Mm-hmm.
you think they're hearing what your intent is.
Right.
But they're hearing something much different than what you're saying.
Right.
So then sometimes if the child misbehaves, it's really not they're misbehaving, it's because what they understood.
Right, right.
So is that part of what a behavior analyst does?
Right. And so when you're finding out all the information of what's going on and what's happening, a lot of that will come out from the parent. Well, I asked them to do this, and I said, and they did that. But I think what you meant was, you know, you wanted, you know, everything picked up. But how they see it is they did exactly what you asked them to do, which is pick up the toys.
And so that's like learning how to speak autism.
Right.
Okay. So let's give
Very specific, clear sentence, right?
So let's pick an example. So now you're talking about an antecedent of behavior and a consequence. So the classic one is, my child is playing on his iPad and it's time for dinner. And I tell him it's time for dinner.
Right.
And I tell him, turn off your iPad. He doesn't turn it off, so I take it away from him. Tell me what kind of thing he reacts.
Right.
Tell me what kind of things you would look at as a behavior analyst in that kind of a circumstance.
We just did that today. So,
Common one.
yeah, very common with that iPad. So, or any electronic DS, or, you know, playing videos at the time, and it's time for them to transition off. Again, like we talked about in the last segment, is having a transition. If you don't have it and you go over and say it's dinner time, you know, you're going to have a huge amount of behaviors. They're not going to want to eat. They're going to say, I'm not hungry, I'm not eating. And then they're going to throw the iPad, or something's going to happen. So it's best to always have, like, you know, that transitional warning, a schedule of we're going to have iPad from this time to this time. then we're having dinner at this time, and so that's very helpful as well to try. If you have those things, then you're less likely to have some behaviors. Not saying it's perfect, you know, that you're going to have some resistance or normal kid stuff of, no, I don't want to, you know, I'm not hungry and that kind of stuff, but those are some good things.
So then breaking down that circumstance, why don't you go ahead and tell me what's the A, what's the B, and what's the C that you'd be looking for in that behavior?
So the antecedent. So the behavior of yelling about the iPad. So the antecedent is it's dinner time. The behavior is I'm screaming, yelling about the iPad, and then the C is either the parent took the iPad, right? So maintain the behavior, increase the behavior. So the
by taking the iPad, I could actually increase that behavior?
Yeah.
Why is it that would be? I mean, it would seem like if I took away their iPad, that would be their punishment, their discipline. I take their iPad, see, I showed you. Next time you think about not coming to the dinner table, you're going to think twice about it, right?
Nope. They're not going to think twice
Why not?
about it. Well, because you just created the behavior. You increased the behavior, actually, of the screaming, yelling, and now they probably are not going to eat. So just ripping it, just taking the iPad, saying, stop it, it's dinner time, is for an autistic kid, their whole world was that iPad. And dinner is a non-preferred activity typically to an autistic kid. So eating's not really high on the list.
So for them, it's learning to understand that their brain works differently.
Their brain works differently, and how you ask them to stop things has to be different. How you schedule your time, because typically I wouldn't do iPad right before dinner. I would do it after dinner and after shower, because you want to get those non-preferred activities they don't like out of the way before they have, the preferred activity, which is iPad.
So in that case, you might change the antecedent, which means you're going to change what's going to lead up to that behavior.
You'd work in the antecedent area. That's the best area to work at in changing a behavior. If you work in the antecedent area, you never get, which is the A, you never get to the B, which is behavior. And so if you're always working in that antecedent and running a schedule, or how you present or ask things to stop, then you don't, typically you can reduce that behavior or get rid of it.
So then what I'm learning then, what you're saying is if you focus on the antecedent, you're looking at what leads up to the behavior, and if that behavior then is something that you don't even have to deal with as much, then the consequence becomes less important because the behavior's not there.
Yeah, there's no consequence because you don't have the behavior. There's no C that happens.
So then for the parent to look at it, each time they see a behavior that they're seeing that's negative, part of what they can do is back up. So after they get done disciplining their child for whatever it was, they can step back, and the next minute, the next day, the next hour, they can say, okay, here was the behavior, here's what happened. And I can back it up and say, okay, this is how it responded, good or bad. This was the behavior that led up to that consequence. And most importantly, looking back and saying, okay, if I don't want to reinvent the wheel and go through the same sort of thing again, don't set myself up for failure so I don't have that antecedent happen again and again. So learning from your mistakes, but you kind of have to look at it in a different way that parents aren't used to.
Right, because typically everyone works in the consequence area.
Great.
So responds.
All right, well, thanks a lot for sharing all that with us tonight, and I hope you all learned something today. Good night.